When Rowan Howell purchased his home in the prestigious Stonemere Bluffs community, he believed he was securing a peaceful life for himself and his family. With wide tree-lined streets, lakeside walking trails, and a reputation for order and tranquility, the community seemed the perfect escape from the chaos of the city. Rowan studied the Homeowners Association bylaws closely before signing, determined to avoid any of the horror stories he had heard about strict HOAs. Everything appeared reasonable regulations about trash bins, fencing heights, lawn maintenance, and exterior changes. Nothing seemed unusual or threatening. For months, life in Stonemere Bluffs remained calm. Rowan kept his home immaculate, followed every guideline, and made sure nothing he did could be interpreted as a violation. But beneath the peaceful surface of the neighborhood, something was already stirring. The HOA board, led by President Corbin Maddox, had long been known among older residents for its aggressive enforcement style, though newcomers rarely discovered that truth until they were already entangled. The first sign of trouble came when Rowan received a formal violation notice for unauthorized exterior alterations. Confused, Rowan inspected his property multiple times, but found nothing out of order. When he attended the next HOA meeting to request clarification, Corbin dismissed him abruptly, claiming that the details were logged internally and that Rowan would receive documentation when appropriate. That sentence alone triggered Rowan's suspicion. It implied there were internal rules he had never been allowed to see. Other board members avoided eye contact, and the atmosphere in the room was tense, almost rehearsed. Rowan left the meeting with a sense of unease, knowing something was being kept from him. A week later, he received another warning, this time stating that the alleged violation could lead to escalating fines. That was when Rowan realized the HOA wasn't simply enforcing rules. They were using them as a weapon, determined to uncover the truth. Rowan requested a full record of Stonemere Bluffs governing documents, which by law he had a right to access. Corbin delayed, stalled, and then claimed the files were under review. That was the moment Rowan understood. The HOA wasn't refusing because they were busy. They were refusing because they were hiding something. And Rowan Howell, patient but persistent, was exactly the wrong kind of homeowner to attempt to intimidate. Beneath his calm demeanor, he had a background in compliance law, and he recognized the signs of an organization operating outside its own rules. What Rowan didn't know yet was that Stonemere Bluffs had a secret side rule, an undocumented policy the board had quietly used for years to manipulate residents. A rule never voted on, never disclosed, and absolutely illegal. And they never expected someone to find it. Rowan's suspicions intensified after conversations with several longtime residents, each of whom had similar stories, but none had ever been able to prove wrongdoing. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Marvell, explained that her attempt to repaint her shutters was halted by the HOA despite the color-matching approved samples. Another resident described being warned about unapproved gardening structures, even though her small greenhouse had been present since before the HOA was formed. Each story shared a common thread: vague accusations, no written proof, and evasive responses from Corbin and his board. It became clear to Rowan that the administration thrived on ambiguity. They weaponized fear, issuing warnings they knew residents wouldn't challenge. Most people simply paid fines or made changes out of intimidation, not because they believed they were in the wrong. But Rowan wasn't most people. One evening, while reviewing community records at the public library, Rowan discovered archived minutes from Stonemere Bluffs' earliest HOA meetings. Buried in these documents was a reference to a supplemental governance packet, approved internally by a previous board, but never officially adopted or disclosed to homeowners. A chill ran through Rowan as he realized this must be the source of the mysterious violations. After cross-checking dates, he noticed a pattern. almost every questionable rule enforced by Corbin originated during the years when this supplemental packet was referenced. That meant the HOA was enforcing rules that weren't legally binding. Rowan needed direct evidence, but Corbin's refusal to hand over documents only confirmed Rowan's theory that the board was terrified of anyone seeing what was inside. Rowan began documenting everything: emails, meeting interactions, violation notices, and resident testimonies. His training in compliance made him meticulous, and he built a timeline detailing every instance where the HOA cited internal policy without proper documentation. Rowan realized that exposing the truth required a strategic approach. If he publicly accused the board without proof, they would retaliate, label him a troublemaker, and possibly escalate fines. Instead, Rowan decided to request access again, but this time in writing, with legal wording referencing his state's homeowner access statutes. The board now had a deadline and a legal obligation. When no documents arrived by the mandated deadline, Rowan sent a second notice, this time copying board Vice President Lorna Creighton, who historically disagreed with Corbin's aggressive style but rarely spoke up. The pressure worked. Lorna responded discreetly late at night, sending Rowan a message with a single sentence: "Meet me tomorrow morning behind the clubhouse." Rowan immediately sensed that this would be the turning point, the moment someone within the HOA finally broke the silence. What he didn't anticipate was how deep the corruption truly went, or how explosive the truth would be once revealed. The next morning, Rowan arrived early. A thick fog hung over the Stonemere Bluffs walking trail behind the clubhouse, giving the air a muted gray stillness. He found Lorna standing near a bench, clutching a folder tightly to her chest. She looked nervous, her eyes darting, as though she expected someone to be watching. When Rowan approached, she took a deep breath and handed him the folder without a word. Inside were photocopied pages of the supplemental governance packet, the very document the board denied existed. Rowan flipped through the pages and felt his stomach turn. The packet contained dozens of unapproved rules, many targeting specific homeowners by name. There were clauses allowing the board to verbally approve violations without written documentation, authorizing spot inspections without notice, and granting the president the discretion to evaluate compliance outside standard guidelines. Rowan was stunned. These rules gave the board near dictatorial powers, all while being completely hidden from residents. Even worse, several board signatures had clearly been forged. The packet was not only illegal, it was fraudulent. Lorna confessed everything in a trembling voice. Corbin used the packet to intimidate homeowners he didn't like, or those who resisted him. He threatened board members who questioned him and doctored meeting minutes to conceal his misuse of authority. Lorna had remained silent for years, afraid of retaliation, but watching Rowan challenge the board awakened her sense of responsibility. She warned him that Corbin would retaliate aggressively if he discovered Rowan had the documents. Rowan assured her the evidence would be protected, and more importantly, used strategically. Returning home, Rowan scanned the documents, creating multiple encrypted backups, then prepared a detailed report. He cross-referenced each illegal rule with instances in which homeowners had been fined or warned. The data lined up perfectly. But Rowan also understood that simply possessing the documents wasn't enough. Corbin would deny everything unless Rowan struck at the board's weak point: legality. Rowan drafted a letter addressed to the entire HOA membership, carefully worded and supported by screenshots of the documents. But instead of releasing it immediately, Rowan decided to present the evidence privately at the next board meeting, giving Corbin one final chance to step down quietly. What Rowan didn't know was that Corbin had already sensed trouble. That evening, an unexpected courtesy inspection team from the HOA appeared at Rowan's home, photographing his yard and carport. Rowan watched them through the window, realizing Corbin was making a preemptive strike. The board president wasn't just worried, he was scared. And fear made him reckless. At the next board meeting, Rowan Howley arrived early, carrying only a slim briefcase and his calm determination. The room, typically quiet and orderly, buzzed with an unusual tension. Corbin Maddox, the board president, and several senior members, including Vice President Lorna Creighton, sat at the long oak table, whispering quietly as they arranged stacks of papers. Rowan took a seat near the front, flipping open his notebook. He had carefully rehearsed every point he would raise, fully aware that the board had used fear and secrecy to control homeowners for years. As the meeting began, Rowan stood and spoke clearly, his voice echoing across the room. He presented a detailed timeline of board actions that directly correlated with the secret supplemental packet, referencing both dates and specific violations. The evidence he displayed included Lorna's confidential folder, which corroborated every claim. The room went silent. Even Corbin, who often relied on intimidation, appeared unsettled. Neighbors attending the meeting, previously hesitant to speak, now leaned forward in anticipation, sensing that a pivotal moment was unfolding. Rowan emphasized that these undisclosed rules violated state HOA transparency statutes and that continued enforcement could expose the board to legal action. Corbin tried to interrupt, citing procedural arguments, but Rowan calmly countered each point with references to the law. He then proposed a solution. The board either formally rescind the secret rules, document them properly, and share them with homeowners, or face escalation through legal channels. For the first time in years, the power dynamic shifted. The board could no longer hide behind ambiguity. Every homeowner present could see the evidence of past manipulation. Corbin's face reddened, and whispers filled the room. Lorna quietly nodded to Rowan, signaling her support. By the end of the session, the board agreed, albeit reluctantly, to suspend all enforcement actions based on undisclosed rules pending formal review. Rowan left the meeting with a mixture of relief and determination, understanding that vigilance would remain crucial. The homeowners, empowered by what they had witnessed, began to discuss new mechanisms to ensure that no future board could operate in secrecy, reinforcing a community ethos of transparency and accountability. In the days following the meeting, Rowan worked closely with neighbors to ensure the board adhered to its promise. He coordinated workshops explaining homeowners' legal rights, emphasizing that rules affecting property and behavior must be documented and publicly accessible. Several families shared stories of being unfairly targeted in the past, and Rowan documented these accounts meticulously, creating a record that could be referenced in future disputes. Meanwhile, the board scrambled to rewrite the secret rules into the official HOA manual. Each change was scrutinized by Rowan and other residents, ensuring that any prior abuses were clearly corrected. Corbin attempted subtle intimidation, sending emails with veiled threats and scheduling random inspections, but residents had learned from Rowan's strategy. They recorded every interaction, maintaining transparency. The momentum continued to build, with the once silent neighborhood now actively engaged in protecting their rights. The dynamic had permanently shifted. Homeowners no longer feared the board. Rowan's persistence not only exposed past misconduct, but established an empowered community culture where rules were debated openly, legal protections were understood, and secrecy was no longer an option. Families could host gatherings, make property changes, and live peacefully without fear of arbitrary fines. The HOA, humbled and cautious, realized the limitations of unchecked authority. Rowan's efforts became a template for advocacy, demonstrating that knowledge, preparation, and community engagement could counter even long-standing systemic control. By the end of the month, a sense of unity pervaded the neighborhood. Residents openly celebrated their restored rights, while keeping a vigilant eye on future governance. Over the next several weeks, Rowan monitored the board's adherence to transparency, attending meetings and reviewing any new policies. The supplemental packet, once secret, was now formally archived and publicly referenced. Residents were empowered to raise questions without fear of retribution. Corbin attempted minor resistance by challenging some procedural interpretations, but legal advisors and community oversight prevented escalation. Families began hosting celebrations, renovating properties, and enjoying their homes in ways previously restricted by arbitrary interpretations. The neighborhood's atmosphere shifted from tense compliance to collaborative engagement. Rowan documented every step, ensuring that any future disputes could be resolved with clear evidence. Other boards in neighboring communities, hearing about Rowan's success, reached out for advice, recognizing the importance of balancing rule enforcement with transparency. The story of Stonemere Bluffs began circulating quietly among HOA networks, establishing Rowan as an example of effective lawful advocacy. By combining meticulous research, community engagement, and legal awareness, he demonstrated that even the most entrenched systems could be held accountable when residents remained informed and organized. The transformation was profound. Homeowners experienced renewed confidence. Children played freely, and gatherings resumed without fear. Corbin's authority was permanently diminished, and the once dominant narrative of control was replaced by collective empowerment and transparency. Rowan's strategy ensured that no hidden rule would ever again wield unchallenged power over Stonemere Bluffs residents. Months later, the neighborhood had fully adapted to the new standards of transparency. Stonemere Bluffs residents were no longer passive. They actively reviewed proposals, requested documentation, and held the board accountable. Rowan, now a respected figure within the community, continued monitoring board actions while mentoring other homeowners on legal rights. The board, aware that secret rules could no longer be used as leverage, implemented open communication protocols requiring public distribution of all new policies. Social gatherings returned with energy and enthusiasm, from block parties to family picnics, as residents felt safe hosting events without fearing retaliation. Children played freely in the yards, neighbors spoke openly about community improvements, and property enhancements proceeded with transparent approvals. Rowan reflected on the journey, recognizing that knowledge, courage, and persistence had transformed an atmosphere of fear into one of empowerment. The secret side rule, once a weapon of oppression, had become the key to unlocking fairness and restoring confidence. Stonemere Bluffs had not only survived the confrontation, it had evolved. Transparency, vigilance, and community collaboration had become the foundation for a harmonious neighborhood. Rowan Hale's story became legendary locally, demonstrating that even entrenched organizations could be held accountable when residents understood their rights, gathered evidence, and worked collectively. The hidden rule had been discovered, exposed, and turned against its creators, ultimately ensuring that homeowners could live freely, protect their families, and shape the community on their own terms.